Hey everybody, good afternoon. Wanted to take a little bit of time and make a video to help you guys with some things that I see students kind of miss in regards to buttons and possibly just movie clips in general. So I just wanted to cover some really simple things. Starting off, when you are making a file, unless you are specifically asked for these particular types of formats, I recommend just going to more presets and using the standard, the 640 by 480. I've just found this to be just way easier to use, and as well as when you produce your work, it's going to be just a smaller file size. Obviously, feel free to change the size to whatever you want. You can change it right here. So feel free to do that if you so desire. I've just have personally found this to be the best starting point, especially when you're prototyping ideas. So for now, let's go ahead and start making some buttons. So obviously a button can be anything. You can take the classic brush here, and right now I'm hitting the right bracket tool on the keyboard to make the brush bigger, and the left bracket brush tool will make it smaller. So I mean, this could become a button. Really, just any type of shape on the stage can become a button. I'm not going to use this for right now. We just want to stick with the rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and use the rectangle tool. I'm going to drag this out about what I think the button, the size should be. So we have our button. We see over in the properties tab under tool, we get the fill color and the stroke, so we can obviously change all this stuff. But let's go ahead and start making this thing into a button. So we're going to go ahead and select the entire thing and hit F8, or you can right click and choose it here, and you want to make sure it's set to button. And I'm going to call this first button. So this is the symbol name, which appears in the library. So here's first button. So we can just keep dragging these out, and we have tons of buttons. Now, because it's a symbol, it's something, these are all copies of the symbol. So if I come into this one or any of these, obviously, and double click, I can now edit it, and I'm editing this symbol. So any changes that I make in this one, when I'm inside of here, those changes are going to be reflected in the symbol, which are going to be reflected in all the other instances. So that's just kind of a basic premise for what the symbols are used for. So now that we're in here, we got up, over, down, and hit. And what I see a lot of students doing is not really paying attention to what the hit is. So I'm going to hit F6 to make, so now we're completely full of keyframes. So the hit frame, as you can see, is this entire region. Now, I can actually, I'm going to come in here for the over. I'm going to hit, I'm going to hit F6, F6 to make keys on all of these guys. So for the over, I'm just going to click on the center, come back to properties, and I'm going to change the fill color to just something for now. So if I come back out to my scene and hit Control Enter, you see that all these buttons now have that hover color. So the hit state, if we go back in, the hit state says where will the button be activated. So if I make the hit bigger than what the button was, so we can see the hit state's bigger. So when we run this now, you see that I don't even have to get on top of the button for it to be activated, and it's the same for all of them. They all are sharing that same hit state. So that's what you can do. Sometimes that might be what you want. Maybe you want to make the particular hit smaller. It's all up to, of course, it's up to you, but I just wanted to make sure that that's something that you're aware of. What you don't want to have is, let's say we have our text, put this in here, and I'm just going to say mouse off. Okay. So what you don't want to have, if this is in the center, you don't want your hit. Let's come over here, right click and remove the frame. So the only thing on the hit now is the mouse off. Okay, so if we run this now, you see I have to get right on the letters for it to work, and that's not a good user experience. So I recommend that you do not do that. I'm going to actually remove the frame there. Hit F6 on the hit frame to remake this one, because it makes sense. Your hit frame should be the size of your button. Okay, so I have my text. I'm going to select everything. So I'm selecting both the text and the vector box, the rectangle beneath it. And I'm going to come up here to the Align tab, and I'm going to hit Align Horizontal Center and Align Vertical Center. And you see that now puts the text right dead in the middle of the button. And go to Properties, and under Paragraph, just make sure that it's set to Align Center. So with that being the case, I come over here and hit F6 again to make different keys for the up, over, and down. So for the up, the mouse is off. For the over, I don't want the color to be this. It's basically invisible. So let's make it blue, and I'm going to put it to mouse over. And for the down, obviously we'll do mouse down. Okay, so we have our 3 keys, and let's go ahead and just Control Enter and test this again. So we see, we click it, mouse down, over, and off. Those are the 3 states of the button, and because they're symbols that we're updating, these are all showing the same behavior. So if we wanted to use these buttons as a good starting point, it's like, okay, I like the way the button works, but now I want this one to say something different, then you're going to have to come over here and you're going to duplicate the symbol, and let's just say, call it 2. Keep everything else the same. Now, when we pick on this particular button, you see that it's showing that it is an instance of the first button. So we don't want that. We want to come over here and drag out. So it's the same button so far, but you see now it's an instance of button 2, whereas this one's button 1. So we can come in and we can change this to be whatever we want. So maybe this one just says off, just for now. Okay, and so we come out and we see it's the same thing, but now obviously those states are going to be different, but we have a different button. So that's kind of the premise there. So I want to go back and show you something really cool that you can do with buttons that I haven't seen any students do, and it's a really cool trick that really makes it look so nice. And this is something that is very easy to do with Adobe Animate, and can make your interfaces really enhanced. And it's very hard to do this kind of stuff with web programming, cascading style sheets and things like that. It's possible, but with Adobe Animate, it's just a million times easier to do this. So what we're going to do is, I just want to style this button a little bit more. So if we click on the background of the rectangle, we see that we have a fill color. And if I click on that, you see that we can switch all these, and then down here at the bottom, we can set it to a gradient. So I'm just going to pick this gradient here. And if we want to adjust this gradient, if we come over here and hit these little buttons, edit the toolbar, we see here is the gradient transform tool, and the hotkey is F. So we can come over here and click on this and hit F, and now we can move our gradient around. So I'm gonna I'm going to adjust this a little bit. Something probably like that. Now I want to adjust the colors. So again, I come over to property and we see, actually we need to go to window color, which Control Shift F9. So you see here's the color. We've got a white and black gradient. So I'm gonna say pick a blue, something like that, and that's fine, whatever. Well, maybe I'll make this, maybe I make the white not so bright. Give it something like that, looks fine. Okay, so we have our gradient for the over. So obviously we've got 3 more. So I'm going to go and do the same for the down. For the down, I'm going to pick on the background. I'm going to do the same thing. See right here with the color tab showing, I can just jump right to linear gradient, and it's going to use the same colors as before, but because it's linear or radial, so we see now it's back to what we were using on the upstate. I'm not going to really worry with the placement right now, but what I want to do is I want to do a little bit of enhancement on the over, so when we're mousing over, that we see something really cool. So how we're going to do that is I'm going to pick the actual rectangle. So remember, we've got the fill color, and then we have this this small border. We don't want to deal with the border. I want to deal with the rectangle. So on the over key of the button, I select on the rectangle, and I hit F8 to make this movie clip. And I'm going to call this, let's just call this like hover key, and then double click to go inside of it. So this movie clip is gonna play. We're gonna make an animation here. This animation is gonna play whenever the user has moused over this particular button. So what I'm gonna do is set this to a, let's just leave this for now. And what I wanna do is I'm gonna make a radial color wheel. Okay, and I'm going to use my ellipse, and I'm going to make a pretty big. If you hold Shift and Alt, you can drag out from the center. Just holding Shift will drag out like that. So something probably like this, pretty good size here. I don't need the stroke, so I'm just going to select and delete that. So you see all we now have is this huge circle. So I'm going to switch this over to a linear, I'm sorry, let's hit F, and let's go back to the fill, and let's just pick, there we go, that's what I want. So go back to the color. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set some colors. And do not understand why that is. There we go. Sorry about that. That was weird. So I'm just going to set some colors, something like that, and then I'm going to click and add a couple more swatches. So I'm just going to set some colors here. It's a bit crazy, but that's fine. Sure, let's go with that. So we can place these however we want. So now that we've got this, what we're going to do is I'm going to take, so we have our radial color wheel, and this right now, when I pick on it, we can see all these hash marks. This lets us know that this is not a symbol, this is a graphic. So what we want to do is we want to turn this, so F8, turn this into a symbol, and I'm going to call this animated wheel. Okay, now with the animated wheel selected. We select it, we see now get the border showing us that we're selected on something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a keyframe here in the timeline. So just for now, let's say we go to frame 60, hit F6, and use the transform tool and put it right here on the corner where you see the rotate. And I'm going to rotate this 180, right click, create a classic tween. Okay, so it rotates that way. Now we'll go to 120, and here's a little trick. You would think that if we're here at 160 and we go to 120 and we rotate this another 180 and then right click and hit create classic, that it will rotate, but you see how it goes back the opposite way. I want this to continue rotating one direction. So what you can do is kind of force it to go the direction that you want. So I'm gonna go halfway. So remember, when we rotated it, we were rotating it clockwise, and all of a sudden it goes counter. So I'm gonna go to I'm gonna go to frame 90, hit F6, and I'm gonna rotate this. I'm gonna continue in that clockwise fashion. So we see we were going this way, we now keep going in the clockwise fashion, and then when we get to this point, it'll pick it up and it'll continue out the rest of the rotation. Okay, so we have a nice smooth circle. It's just a small trick, but hopefully you see how that works. So with this being said, we now have this spinning circle of color, and what we want to do is we want to actually use our button down here. So if we have our button, we want this button to become we want this button to show through and only show the color here. So if we come back and we go back to frame 1. Okay, so there's our button. So we want to see this radial color spinning inside of the button itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to move this on top of the radial color, right click and hit mask. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to make sure that the mask and the bottom layer have the same amount of keys. So I'm going to come here and hit F6, hit F6, and okay, so just had a different little issues there with what was being visible. So the best thing or good thing to do is just toggle the whole eyeball, which as you see will do all the layers itself. So we have we can now see that this guy, this shape is masking out what's on the inside. So if we go back and hit Control Enter now, we mouse over, we see the animated color masking through our button and giving us a really cool mouse over state. We mouse off, comes back on, and every time you mouse over, it starts that animation at the same place. It starts at frame 0, and it's just going to sit there and keep looping because the movie clip has an animation, but the movie clip doesn't have any stops. There's no stops in the timeline, so it's just gonna run here, hit the last frame, bounce back to frame 0, and keep going. So that's a cool part of setting up this particular button. The next part of what we're going to do is actually look at doing a little bit of coding, but I just wanted to take the time to kind of show you this really cool trick about setting up your buttons. So in the next video, we'll actually go over coding this up a little bit more. All right, see you next one.